He has Giannis behind him, gets to Leonard. He stops a facial by Kawhi Leonard over Giannis Antetokounmpo.
You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to the I Still Love This Game podcast. And we have so much to talk about today. We've got obviously the Bucks and Raptors. Believe me, I'm going to talk about that extensively. We've also got the Warriors and Blazers. We've got obviously the Warriors and Raptors NBA Finals preview coming up. We've got questions. There's a lot to discuss. But what I want to start with is I can't remember the last time that we have seen such a contrast between what's good about basketball and what's bad about basketball simultaneously in the conference finals. And what I mean by that is we had, such inspired play, intensity coming from the Eastern Conference, no less, which is hilarious if you've been paying attention in the last 10 years of the NBA. And then on the other end, we saw such a lackluster, unmotivated, lack of self-belief out of the Portland Trail Blazers up against the Warriors. In the Western Conference, I still think the Blazers could have been very competitive up against the Warriors, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to start the show by just pointing out, we saw the best and worst, as I said, simultaneously in the last 2 weeks of the NBA, because the conference finals in the East was fantastic. The conference finals in the West, well, to be honest with you, I didn't bother staying up to watch half of these games because it was just, even though Portland had the lead in pretty much every game, it just didn't feel like it was playoff basketball, let alone conference finals basketball. And I think that a lot of NBA fans, they resonate with that feeling too. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde when it comes to the product. And I know it's a landscape of sports. We're not going to get incredible performances, but what we want is effort. And can you imagine if we saw the same kind of intensity and desire out of Portland? How good of a series that would have been. And belief too. Self-belief. That would have been fantastic to see. But in terms of belief, in terms of desire and self-confidence, who would have ever thought we'd use these attributes to describe the Toronto Raptors? And I'm happy for them. I started feeling really sorry for the Raptors fans, especially after last year. We all know the story last year. Top seed in the Eastern Conference. They survived a pretty valiant effort up against the veteran Washington Wizards in the first round, despite them being an 8th seed. I said last year plenty of times, would we have been shocked if the Wizards had made the conference finals heading into the season? And I'd have to say no. But the Wizards, stalled and stuttered their way to the 8th seed, and they played pretty well up against the Raptors, and the Raptors survived that. And then, of course, they ran into LeBron, Kevin Love, J.R. Smith, all those guys in Cleveland. They got swept by the 4th-seeded Cavaliers. And let's keep in mind, the 4th-seeded Cavaliers, they were pushed to 7 games by Oladipo and the Indiana Pacers. So they weren't playing their best basketball either. And then, of course, they made a trade, and I like the trade. Obviously, everyone loves it now, but I like the trade because even though it was pretty much considered that you're only going to get 1 year out of Kawhi Leonard, which who knows now, right? But at the time, it was kind of accepted. That's all you're going to get. It was a 1-year rental. I figured that was a way for them to get out of some of those contracts, because you get rid of DeRozan. Now you're only really locked into Kyle Lowry, who's quote-unquote an untradeable asset, but you can give up draft picks, you can give up young players to go, and if they decide to rebuild, which they would have had to if Kawhi Leonard was to leave, and that's a better way forward going into a complete rebuild, not the trust the process nonsense where you just tank every year, but if you're going to rebuild, you may as well get rid of a lot of bad contracts and then build your way up and try to sign players and things of that nature. But they would have never had that opportunity had they kept DeRozan. So if they had kept DeRozan, how are you going to trade in all your young assets to get rid of DeRozan, and then all your young assets which you would no longer have because you've already dealt them to get rid of DeRozan? how are you going to get rid of a Kyle Lowry? It would handcuff your franchise. So I figured it was a good trade at the time. I had no idea Kawhi Leonard would be playing at this level. And nobody knew. I mean, this guy is playing at maybe the highest level we've seen for a wing player playing on both ends of the floor. I don't know. I don't want to say since Jordan. Maybe since Dwayne Wade in 2006. It's been a while since we've seen something like this. And he hasn't slowed down. I said leading into this series that, hey, we're going to see, he's going to get tested here up against Milwaukee. Because Milwaukee is going to play defense against him. And he responded by pretty much not even dipping in his own playoff standards of production. Unbelievable. And his leadership through the roof. These guys follow him. And he took on Antetokounmpo. There you go. I said it. Antetokounmpo. Thanks, Marv Alberts, because I put that clip at the front. But he took on Giannis. He took that matchup and he outplayed him. And Giannis, he's got to look exactly. And they were so badly outcoached. And I'm a Budenholzer fan too, right? But they were putting, like, it's one thing to say, oh, you can survive in the NBA by dunking and dominating the paint. That's true, but you have to start in the paint. You can't put these... Can you imagine... Okay, let's use Shaq as an example. Shaq dominated around the basket. No questions about it, right? But look at where Shaq started. Shaq started on the block. They didn't put him behind the three-point line and say, get to the front of the rim. What an idiotic play. What an idiotic situation to put Antetokounmpo in, where I know he's more of a perimeter player than Shaq. Spare me the emails. I get that. But what I'm saying is you can't put him in a situation like that where they're just backing off him, daring to shoot threes when that's his weakness. Even Philly isn't that dumb. Even Philly, with Ben Simmons, even they don't make that mistake. They put Ben Simmons a lot closer to the basket. So it was disappointing to see them go out that way, but their weaknesses were thoroughly exposed. And your weaknesses will be thoroughly exposed if you lose 4 straight games. But if you want to see something interesting about the NBA playoffs, and this is what I really like about it, even though they had lost 4 straight games, they being Milwaukee, and what the hell is that outside? I'm not sure if that's coming through the microphone. It's like some geese or ducks or something having a war. That's my email. That's what you guys sound like in my emails that I get. No, but in all fairness, even though Milwaukee lost 4 straight, let's think back a week ago. Just 1 week. They were up 2-0, and they had so many opportunities to steal Game 3. What a different conversation we'd be having right now. It would be totally different. We'd be talking about how Milwaukee, how Giannis is ascending to, or at least on the pathway to a top 20 player of all time category. That's what we'll be talking about. Instead, now we're talking about how flawed he is. And he is flawed. You need a jump shot. You don't necessarily need a 3-point jump shot. But you need something, especially if you're going to be playing on the perimeter. You can't just rely on putting your head down and shouldering players out of the way to get to the front of the rim. At some point, good defenses and good teams will force you into your weakness, and you need to be able to counter that. They haven't. He had no counter, and Milwaukee had no counter because the limited times they did put him on the block, they did try to put him in different situations. Instant double team. There was no movement. There was lack of confidence from his teammates in catching and shooting or cutting. It was just they had no counter. That absolutely no counter, which is even more mind-boggling because you would have thought that Boston of all teams would have exposed this, considering their coach and considering their talents on the perimeter and their ability to essentially swarm. And that's why it was so surprising to see them lose in the way that they did. But hey, 1 week is a long time in the NBA playoffs, and now we got the Toronto Raptors going to the NBA Finals, and that's crazy. I'll give them all the credit in the world for not just giving in and not just giving up and saying, look, we got to implode this. You know, they thought, let's roll the dice one more time. They essentially had Plan B, as I said, which was if it wasn't successful or if Kawhi decided to leave, they could go straight into a rebuild mode. I get that, but the fact that they stuck it out one more time, and it's not easy. You know, it's probably easier to be in the trust the process mode than the amount of heartbreak that they were putting their fans through every single year. The amount of teasers that they were getting. Well, maybe this is a year, especially after the brutal way that they were taken apart last season in the playoffs. So give them all the credit in the world. They also made a difficult decision, but obviously the right decision of firing Dwayne Casey, even though he was the coach of the year. They brought in Nick Nurse, and the development of the other players. Kyle Lowry, I've said plenty about him and his ineptitude in the NBA playoffs. Couldn't be happier for him. That was some genuine emotion that we saw from all the Raptors, including Kawhi Leonard, who everyone wants to laugh at because of his laugh or whatever. Grow up. Let's just grow up. How about that? And let's not focus in on those stupidities and those idiosyncrasies. I mean, they're players. I mean, some people are going to have silly laughs. I get that. But, that's the type of thing that drives me nuts, so that we forget that these players, just because they're incredible athletes, they don't have, my goodness, one might have an odd laugh. But a lot of casual fans will harp on that and say, well, he's emotionless or whatever, or he's a cyborg or whatever. Just whatever. That's so silly. But in terms of, well, I may as well get into it right now, because I've said pretty much all I wanted to say about the Warriors and Blazers series and how disappointed I was in that. So let's go straight into the NBA Finals preview. And the way I look at it, I'm a lot happier for a couple of reasons. I said in the previous episode, like, what happens, and this is why I picked the Raptors, even though there's a flip of the coin, but I went with the Raptors just because I wanted to see Kawhi Leonard get his revenge. And as an NBA fan, I wanted to see the resolution of one of those questions that we never had answered. What happens when Kawhi Leonard plays up against the Warriors? We know what happens. We knew what was going on in Game 1 of the 2017 NBA Western Conference Finals. With Kawhi Leonard, they were up by, 18, 19 points, and Zaza Pachulia takes about 4 additional steps after he closed out and took out Kawhi Leonard's ankle. We know what happened there, but we didn't know what was going to be the result of that series. Personally, I think the Warriors still would have won. I think it would have been a longer series. But now we get to see it, especially now that Kawhi Leonard, he has better teammates around him than what he had in San Antonio. LaMarcus Aldridge was not the LaMarcus Aldridge we've seen the last 2 seasons. So you got Marc Gasol, you got Siakam, you got Kyle Lowry, you got Van Fleet, which is a nice... We'll talk about Eric Bledsoe in a minute too, but my goodness, where did that come from with Van Fleet? You've got a plenty of... You've got a Barker. This team is fearless. I kind of, this is, as I said, another reason why I was so disappointed with the Blazers. Talk about looking like you're just happy to be there. This team, though, the Raptors, they were down 2-1. Pretty much a must-win game in Philadelphia, otherwise they go down 3-1. They were able to pull that out of the fire, and they were able to win on the road there. And then they were down 2-0 to Milwaukee, and they ran off 4 straight. They do not get easily intimidated. Who would have ever thought we'd be saying this about the Raptors after what we saw last year? But hey, it's a different roster, so we shouldn't be too surprised by it. But let's see how they go up against Golden State. And maybe, just maybe, they have, the questions that we're probably going to hear is what is Toronto's answer for Steph Curry? How are they going to slow down Kevin Durant if he's playing? How are they going to slow down Klay Thompson? The biggest question of this series is how you're going to slow down Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is by far and away the best player in the NBA right now. And I know I've said pretty much for the last 2 seasons that Kevin Durant is the best player in the NBA. But he's lost that title right now. And he has to, if he plays, it's going to be difficult for him to get it back. Because the way that Kawhi Leonard is playing so well, and this is what I love about it. That's what I absolutely love about it. You put in front of Kawhi Leonard, Giannis, and potentially Kevin Durant, if he's healthy, to get to the title. And he's already taken out one of them. Now he's got the opportunity to take out Kevin Durant. That's going to be some interesting basketball. And the other reason I like their chances is they actually have the defensive depth to at least slow down some of these players for Golden State. And Kyle Lowry does defend Steph Curry very, very well. On top of that, they can hurt them on the offensive glass. And you've got Marc Gasol, you've got Ibaka, you've got Siakam, you've got Kawhi Leonard. These guys can get on the glass, so even if you're missing shots, you can control the tempo. Think back to Oklahoma City and the success they had what was it, 2016 with Kevin Durant, when Kevin Durant was still there. That's where where they hurt them. And when you look at it, with or without DeMarcus Cousins, who knows if he's going to be back, and let alone if he's going to be healthy or effective. They are not a strong rebounding team, Golden State. So it's going to be an interesting series. And I get the feeling that Toronto is probably not going to feel a lot of pressure. They're probably going to be empowered by this. They're probably excited by this. And it kind of reminds me, they got home court advantage too, let's not forget that. But it kind of reminds me of the 93 finals. Remember, 93, they brought in Barkley. Phoenix brought in Barkley. And he was able to take them to the finals. Barkley was an MVP. I mean, Kawhi Leonard should be in the MVP conversation. So, and that was the first time that Phoenix broke through. Phoenix was always also ran in the Western Conference, kind of like Toronto had been. They weren't taken seriously. And now, you bring in a culture changer like Charles Barkley or Kawhi Leonard, they finally break through to the finals. So and then they ran up against the dynasty of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. Just like, hey, now the Toronto Raptors are running up against the dynasty, the modern day dynasty of the NBA, in the Golden State Warriors. So it's going to be interesting. I hope that they're able to balance that excitement with focus. If they are able to do that, they have an excellent chance of winning the title. Who would have thought? Who would have thought after last season and getting swept in the second round that we'd be talking about this? But hey, there's actual excitement heading into this series, and I'm looking forward to it. I really am. And you guys know that you kind of had to twist my arm to do these episodes, but I'm genuinely excited for this series. I think not just for the not just for the Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant matchup. Because obviously, once again, that's assuming that Kevin Durant's going to play a whole lot and he's going to be effective. I mean, he's had the last 3 weeks off, really, when you think about it. But I also want to see Steph Curry. I want to see how Steph Curry responds to the challenge, because he's played very well. Now, what happens if Kevin Durant comes back, is not as effective? Is the offense still going to run through Steph Curry? And that will be interesting to me, because it's one thing to be dominant up against Portland, and I may as well talk about my grievances to Portland here. They kind of just let that happen. They wanted it to happen. It was weird. It was very odd that you saw. And when I say that, their defensive philosophy was disgusting to watch. You know that Golden State's going to want a high pick and roll. And off a moving street, you always have to switch. Portland just laid back. Portland, most times, they allowed Steph Curry to dribble into threes. And I was just like, what is this? This is unbelievable. No wonder he found his rhythm. And that was so disappointing. So we'll see what happens when Steph Curry has to go up against a team that will not do that. And will switch and get up in his face. And potentially double him too, when he's dribbling off those screen situations. Let's see what happens. And let's see if Draymond Green can keep his poise. If he can see that, what happens if Kevin Durant comes back, it messes up the flow of Steph Curry, but he wants all the shots? We've already seen, early on, granted it was early on this season, but we've already seen tension between Draymond Green and Kevin Durant. It could erupt in the NBA Finals, and we could see a situation very similar to what we saw in the 2004 Finals between Shaq and Kobe. So there's a lot of variables heading into this. If you're gonna make me pick, I will go with Golden State though. I think I'm just a little bit too concerned as to whether Toronto will be able to find that balance, as I said, between excitement and focus. And in a blink of an eye, they could be down 2-0, just like Phoenix was up against Chicago. Now, to Phoenix's credit, in '93, they were able to win 2 of the next 3 and bring the series back to the Valley of the Sun, to Phoenix, to extend the series. But if they drop even one of those first 2 games, they could be in for a world of hurt, because Golden State is pretty much a juggernaut at home in the NBA Finals. So there's that. 20 minutes in, and I feel like I've answered a lot of these questions so far. But hey, I'm excited. I'm really excited for the NBA Finals for the first time in, I was excited 2017, 2016, obviously, 2018, not so much. So let's hope it lives up to expectations. But I will go with Golden State, and I'll say that they win. Let's say it will be a Game 6. They'll win in Game 6 at home. And happy to be proven wrong with that. I hope it'll go Game 7. But it'll, if you're a Raptors fan, surely you've got to you've got to be on cloud 9 right now. But let's go to the mailbag. As I said, I've had a lot of emails. If you followed social media, there was one in particular that, wow. Go check it out. Go check it out on my Instagram, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But let's go into the questions. And the first question that I wanted to answer was, what's the greatest single playoff moment of all time, in my opinion? Oi, there's so many. There's so many. I'm going to go with Magic's Skyhook. Magic's Junior Skyhook. And it was a toss-up between that and Jordan's shot against Utah, his final shot. I can't choose two though, can I? Because I've got to pick one. Jordan's shot was so climactic. But when I've spoken to people that were older and they lived it, they said they expected it, which in my opinion actually makes it more impressive. It's harder to do when people expect you to do it. Magic's shot though, the context of it becoming his team prior to. So what I mean by that is, after they lost in 86, the Lakers, Pat Riley went to Magic Johnson and said, hey, I want you to be the focal point on offense. I want you to be I want you to carry our offense, not just facilitate our offense. So Magic responded in kind, upped his scoring average, was a lot more assertive and dominant on the offensive end, and he became league MVP for the first time. He actually wrestled that stranglehold away from Bird, who had won it 3 straight years. And the interesting thing about the shot that Magic made was, as he went down the lane, he could have easily, and no one would have questioned him, because all three of the big three, he hit this shot on Bird, McHale, and Parrish. The shot, Kareem was wide open underneath the basket, and he could have easily passed it off to Kareem, who probably would have gone up and dunked it, and no one would have said a thing. But that was Magic's moment. And to do it in Boston Garden, which was the scene of so many playoff torments. I know they won in 85, but prior to that, they being the Lakers, but prior to that, the Celtics had absolutely owned the Lakers. I think it was, 8 or 9 times they had met in the finals, and 8 or 9 times, every single time, it was a Celtics victory over the Lakers. So for him to have the guts to take that shot and make it, and it was Magic, it was Kareem's own shot too. But then again, Jordan's shot, my goodness, and the thing that I look back about that shot and that game, people talk about, he was 15 or 35 or something like that. He had to be, by the way, because Pippen was injured. And they didn't have a whole lot. They were running on fumes. It was pretty much Jordan and Tony Kukoc. And Tony Kukoc was playing well, but he wasn't, he didn't put up 30 that game. I think he put up about 15, 18 points, whatever it was. But what Jordan did in that game is, and I watched it back semi-recently with Matt Hanley. I'll put the watch-along up soon. But what I noticed was we never saw really the same move twice in that game from Jordan. And that was impressive. I suppose the age factor as well for Jordan, and it being his last shot as a Chicago Bull. Look, man, it's tough. Do I have a coin? If I got a coin around here, I'll flip the coin for it. No, I'll go with Jordan's last shot, because that was the end of his era, really. I mean, we're not going to count Washington. And Magic had other moments after that. So I'm going to flip. Jordan's shot 98, but a very, 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 very close second with Magic's shot in 87. The Jordan book. When is that coming out? It is coming out soon. Next question. This is a bit dated now. Can either the Bucks or the Raptors compete with Golden State? Well, I kind of answered this already. Yes, the Raptors can absolutely compete with Golden State. The question of focus is and experience. But then again, my questions of focus, I mean, Kawhi Leonard's been there before. Ibaka has been there before. He hasn't won it, but he has been to the NBA Finals, albeit a long time ago. But he's emerged as a veteran presence for this team as well. So he knows how difficult it is to get back. He's not going to take this lightly. Marc Gasol's been in the league a long time. He hasn't gotten to the finals. Kyle Lowry has been into the So I mean, there's going to be a lot of noise, exterior noise, especially being this is Canada's team, right? It's their only team. So there's going to be a lot of pressure from the media. How well they handle that pressure, that external noise, and if they're able to block it out, then absolutely no questions at all in my mind that they can compete. All-time underrated team. This is kind of vague, because how do you really define who's underrated? Because you can talk about a player being underrated to the point that they become overrated, and vice versa. I'm going to go with players that don't get talked enough about right now. So this is off the top of my head. Probably should have done a little bit of research, but at point guard, I'm going to go Gary Payton. No one talks about him. Very, very good defender. Had a great post game. Great leader. Clutch performer. Ticks all the boxes. Bernard King's going to be my small forward. Nobody ever talks about him, and he was dominant in the especially in the '84 season. Larry Bird will tell you all about that, by the way. Two guard. A part of me wants to say Jordan, because people don't give him the credit defensively that he should get, and they kind of overlook that. But I'm not going to go with that because he gets plenty of credit elsewhere. Let me come back to the two guard. Power forward, it's actually Karl Malone. I'm going to go with Karl Malone for the 4, because people, talk about a victim of circumstances. He was so good offensively and a very good rebounder, a very good defender. It's just he ran into the Bulls. How differently will we be looking at him had he had won 2 titles? Had Jordan not returned in 95, and they had won in 97 and 98. At what point, obviously he'd be a surefire top 10 player of all time. At 5, so the center position, I want to go with Wilt, because he gets forgotten in a lot of these discussions, but I'm actually going to go with Hakeem Olajuwon. Hakeem's going to be number 5 for me. And we're back at shooting guard, and I still don't know where I'm going to go with this. Reggie Miller. Let's go with Reggie Miller. And you might say, really, Reggie? Playoff performance. If we're going from regular season, yeah, he wasn't great, he wasn't dominant. But come playoffs, there are very few teams that could scare the hell out of storied franchises. And Reggie Miller was one of those guys. So, that's my team. Payton, Reggie Miller, Hakeem Olajuwon, Karl Malone, Bernard King. That's my all-time underrated team. The next NBA team to move. Who do I think their next NBA team to move will be? I don't know. I don't have access to the books. It's a good question. I would think a team probably around the Midwest. I would say Detroit's got to be considered at some point, which is unfortunate because there's so much history there. But when you think about it, actually, speaking of Detroit, let me change my point guard of that underrated team and take out Gary Payton and put in Isaiah Thomas. And for reasons that are obvious, I can't believe I skipped over Isaiah for that. Sorry, Isaiah. If there's ever a better example of how underrated he is, the fact that I picked Gary Payton over him, that should be enough. But yeah, I would say the Pistons have got to be concerned. They've won championships, obviously. They've just moved to a new stadium, and yet they still can't get a decent crowd, despite Blake Griffin being on the team, who's a star player, not an MVP caliber player anymore, but he's a star. They made the playoffs, and yet they just, it's disappointing, and that's considered to be essentially a basketball hotbed. The Michigan area. Just look at how popular college basketball is in that area with both Michigan and Michigan State. So I would be concerned if I were them. You've got other franchises too that can't sell out and probably aren't making money. So you think about the Pelicans, for example. Orlando's got to be up there. There's too many teams, too many games, so there's probably quite a big list of teams that could potentially move to somewhere like Vegas or Seattle. But then again, it's such a bad look for the league when teams relocate. So I don't know. I can't really answer that. If I had to put money on any team, that would probably be Detroit. The best Olympic team of all time that is not the 92 team. So I've got 2 Olympic questions here. I'm going to go with the Redeem team. But yeah, let's go with the Redeem team. I'm just going to go with the Redeem team. That one. And who would win? The 2008 Olympic team or the 1992 Dream team? This is a little bit more interesting. I'm assuming we're putting all the players in their prime. And if that's the case, it gets a lot more interesting. If they're not all in their prime, I'm still going to go 92 team because you have Magic, who was essentially not that far removed from his prime. Of course, he had AIDS at that point, but he could still play. He was forced out essentially because of ignorance. And I'm not belittling players, but players didn't know. The society didn't know what AIDS was, or HIV, excuse me. So I still make the mistake now. They didn't know how it was spread. How someone could actually get the virus. So they were concerned for their own safety, and I would be too in that situation. So you got Magic, you got Jordan, you got Barkley, who was on top of his game. You had Karl Malone. You still had Larry Bird, although it was pretty much a shell of Larry Bird. But if you put this guy in his prime, then my goodness. So the 2008 team, yeah, they were good too, obviously. You had LeBron, you had Wade, you had Kobe. I mean, you had Wade coming in off the bench. I think Chris Paul was on that team. I'm pretty sure he was. I know Jason Kidd was, and Tyson Chandler. But then the real selling point to me was who was in the middle. And the 92 team had David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, both in their primes. That's enough for me. That's when you take into account you got Magic, Jordan, Bird, Barkley up front, Malone as well. Let's not forget him. And then manning the middle, you have Robinson and Patrick Ewing. That's a hell of a team. And you put them in their primes, my goodness. Even if you're going up against the primes of Kobe and LeBron and Wade and Carmelo, yeah, I'll happily take the 92 team to win that. And that's where I'm going to exit the show. I hope you enjoyed it. Look, NBA Finals is going to be exciting. I hope it's going to be exciting. Let's hope I didn't jinx that. As I said before, I'm picking the Warriors to win in 6 games, but I think it'll be a competitive series, and there'll be plenty of interest. And don't be sold by saying, well, the NBA needs LeBron because look at the ratings. Let's keep in perspective that the local market is actually a Canadian market for Toronto. So we're not getting those ratings in. So of course there's going to be a dip. Let's be totally honest here. So once again, as if you're looking at ratings to sort of justify how good or how bad the product is as well, let's not contradict ourselves. Because if it's ratings only, then how come was the AAF actually killing the NBA in its debut week, going head to head with primetime NBA games on ABC? So if the ratings are be all and end all, then the league's in trouble, right? Anyway, guys, it's good to be back, and I'm not going to make any promises on when the next episode is because I always screw that up. But hey, the Jordan book's coming out soon. NBA Finals is about to give us a good show. At least it looks like it's going to be like that. So I'm excited. Keep sending through the questions. Send me messages on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Emails, they're always great as well. Thank you guys for listening. Enjoy the basketball, and I'll catch you next time.